We are men. We are not beasts, and we do not intend to be beaten or driven as such. Those were the words of Elliot L.D. Barkley, a 21-year-old inmate at Attica Correctional Facility in upstate New York. He spoke them on September 9, 1971, standing in D Yard with 1,281 other prisoners who had just seized control of one of America's most notorious maximum security prisons. Barkley was days away from his scheduled release. He had no reason to risk everything. But the conditions inside those 30-foot concrete walls had pushed 2,200 men past the point of silence, and someone needed to speak. 4 days later, the state of New York answered him. A helicopter dropped tear gas into the yard. Then hundreds of officers opened fire. In approximately 6 minutes, they killed 39 people, 29 inmates, and 10 hostages. Every single hostage, the very people the assault was supposed to rescue, died from police bullets. Not one was killed by an inmate. And Elliot L.D. Barkley, the young man who stood up and declared his humanity to the world, witnesses say he was alive after prisoners surrendered. He was found with 15 gunshot wounds. Within hours, state officials told the press that inmates had slit the hostages' throats and castrated one of them. It was a lie. Autopsies proved it within 24 hours. But by then, the story had already run on every front page in America. How did a scuffle between two inmates and a faulty gate built in 1931 trigger the deadliest prison uprising in American history? What did 1,281 men build inside D Yard during 4 days of negotiations? And why did the governor refuse to see it? And why has the state of New York never been convicted of killing 39 people or even apologized? Attica Correctional Facility sits at 639 Exchange Street in the town of Attica, Wyoming County, New York, about 30 miles east of Buffalo and 45 miles southwest of Rochester, and a world away from the state capital in Albany. The prison was authorized in 1926 after a crime commission report documented 120% overcrowding in existing facilities. Construction began in 1929. The facility opened on June 14, 1931, at a final cost of $9 million, making it the most expensive penal institution of its era. Its design follows the Auburn system model with a central administrative building and 4 elongated cell blocks radiating outward like the spokes of a wheel. The walls are 30 feet high and 2 feet thick, monitored by 14 guard towers. At the center of the complex sits an intersection the inmates called Times Square, the hub connecting all 4 cell blocks. Whoever controls Times Square controls Attica. Remember that. It becomes important. In September 1971, the prison built for 1,600 men held over 2,200. That was 140% capacity. If you want to picture it, imagine your bedroom. Now, cut it in half. Now share it with a toilet, a metal cot, and 14 to 16 hours of enforced silence every single day. Your cell is 6 feet by 9 feet. You get 1 shower per week. You are allocated 1 roll of toilet paper per month. The state spends 63 cents a day feeding you, and roughly 85% of your diet is pork, which, if you are one of the growing number of Muslim inmates, means the state is essentially starving you as an act of policy. There are 2 doctors for 2,200 men. Medical care consumes about 2% of the prison's operating budget. You work 5 hours a day in the metal shop or the laundry for wages between 20 cents and $1. You cannot support your family. You can barely buy soap. Now here's the part that turns a bad situation into a powder keg. In 1971, 54% of Attica's inmates were black. Another 9% were Puerto Rican. The correctional staff was virtually 100% white. Not a single black guard worked at Attica. 1 Puerto Rican officer was on the entire payroll. The guards were drawn from the surrounding rural communities, small towns in western New York, where many had never interacted with a black person before getting the job. The McKay Commission, which investigated the uprising, later noted that this racial divide fueled systemic discrimination at every level. Black inmates were punished more frequently and more harshly. Discipline was applied selectively and often arbitrarily. Black Muslims were targeted with particular hostility. Any gathering of more than 3 Muslim inmates in the yard was punishable by solitary confinement. Religious services were forbidden. The Quran was banned. Mail was censored, not just inspected, but read, redacted, and sometimes simply destroyed. Political newspapers were cut apart before delivery. Any article about civil rights or black liberation was sliced out with scissors. Meanwhile, inmates had no formal grievance process, no ombudsman, no legal recourse. Complaints were handled by the same guards the complaints were about. Think of it as a system specifically engineered to remind you, every single day, that you are less than human. Cozy, right? On July 2nd, 1971, the men inside Attica tried to work within the system first. A group calling itself the Attica Liberation Faction submitted a manifesto of 27 demands to Commissioner Russell Oswald, Governor Nelson Rockefeller, and Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. They asked for constitutional rights at parole hearings, adequate medical care, religious freedom, minimum wage for prison labor, and an end to male censorship. Commissioner Oswald acknowledged that changes were needed, and then nothing happened. Not a single demand was addressed. When George Jackson, the Black Panther author of Soledad Brother, was killed by guards at San Quentin Prison on August 21st, the temperature inside Attica hit a boiling point. The next morning, somewhere between 700 and 800 inmates sat down in the mess hall for breakfast. Nobody spoke. Nobody ate. Every man wore a black armband. It was a silent, coordinated, one-day hunger strike, and it demonstrated a level of unity across racial and factional lines that no one on the outside had seen coming. 18 days later, Attica exploded. Imagine you just got transferred in. The bus pulls up to Attica, and the first thing you notice is the wall, 30 feet of gray concrete stretching in both directions, topped with guard towers and razor wire. You step off the bus in shackles, and the air hits you. That particular upstate New York humidity that makes everything feel heavier than it already is. You are processed, stripped, searched, assigned a cell in one of the 4 main blocks, A through D. Your home for the foreseeable future is a concrete box barely large enough to lie down in with your arms extended. Your day starts at 5:30 a.m. with a head count. Breakfast is at 6. You eat what you are given, which is usually some variation of starch, grease, and pork. If your religion forbids pork, that is your problem. After breakfast, you are assigned a work detail, the metal shop, the laundry, the grounds crew. You will work for roughly 5 hours and earn somewhere between 20 cents and $1. That is not per hour, that is per day. With that fortune, you can buy a candy bar from the commissary, maybe some writing paper. You are back in your cell by mid-afternoon, and you will stay there until the next morning. 14 to 16 hours of staring at concrete walls. The guards run things, but they do not really control the population, not the way the administration pretends. Power inside Attica in 1971 flows through racial and political lines. The black Muslims are organized, disciplined, and growing. The young lords represent the Puerto Rican inmates. The white population has its own hierarchy, often along gang affiliations from outside. The yard is divided into invisible territories, and crossing the wrong line at the wrong time can get you stabbed with a sharpened piece of metal that used to be a commissary shelf. The guards know this. Many of them do not care. Some of them encourage it. What the McKay Commission would later document is a culture of casual brutality among the correctional staff. Beatings were routine. Racial slurs were standard communication. Inmates who filed grievances found themselves transferred to Housing Block Z, the isolation unit where you spent 23 hours a day in a lightless cell with nothing but your own thoughts for company. 1 shower per week, if the guards felt like it. 1 set of underwear per week. No shoes, no reading material. For many men, HBZ was not punishment for a specific offense. It was punishment for being difficult, for asking questions, for being black and unwilling to pretend you were not. Welcome to the New York State Correctional System, 1971. Hope you were not expecting rehabilitation. What lit the fuse was almost absurdly small. On the afternoon of September 8th, two inmates, Leroy Dewar, a 23-year-old recently transferred from Auburn, and Ray Lamourie, were spotted either scuffling or horseplaying in a yard. Lieutenant Richard Maroney intervened. Dewar struck him. Officers retreated. That evening, Warden Vincent Mancusi ordered both men taken to Housing Block Z. When guards arrived to escort them out, prisoners in the block resisted. Inmates later reported seeing officers beat Dewar as he was dragged away. As Lieutenant Curtis left with Lamourie, a voice from one of the cells called out into the darkness, a warning that tomorrow there would be consequences. Tomorrow came fast. After breakfast on September 9th, around 8:45 a.m., a group of 15 to 25 inmates attacked Lieutenant Curtis in the A-block tunnel. It was chaotic, unplanned, and violent. But what happened next changed everything. The group surged toward Times Square, the central intersection that connects all 4 cell blocks. They hit a gate, a locked steel gate that should have held. Yes, it did not. The weld had been faulty since the prison opened in 1931. 40 years of institutional neglect, and nobody had fixed it. The gate gave way under the pressure of human bodies, and suddenly 1,281 inmates controlled the heart of Attica. In the chaos, Correctional Officer William Quinn, 28 years old, married with 2 children, was severely beaten and thrown from a second-floor catwalk. Some inmates, even in the middle of the uprising, placed him on a stretcher and called for medical help. He was evacuated, but he would die 2 days later from his injuries. Quinn was the only employee killed by inmates during the entire uprising. Remember that number, 1, because it matters when you hear what comes next. By noon, the inmates had consolidated in D Yard, a large open exercise area surrounded by 35-foot walls. They held 42 hostages, guards, and civilian employees, blindfolded and seated in a tight circle. And then something remarkable happened. Instead of descending into chaos, the men organized. They elected negotiators, Herbert X. Blyden, Richard X. Clark, Roger Champin, and the 21-year-old Elliot L.D. Barkley. They appointed Frank Big Black Smith as head of security, responsible for protecting both inmates and hostages. They set up medical stations. They distributed food and water. They gave the hostages mattresses. Not a single hostage was seriously harmed during the 4-day standoff. On September 11th, with media cameras rolling, Barkley stood before the crowd and delivered the words that would define the uprising, and unknowingly, his own epitaph. He was dead 48 hours later. For 4 days, D Yard became something nobody expected, a functioning, self-governed community inside a prison, and the state had no idea what to do about it. On September 10th, Commissioner Russell Oswald arrived at Attica and entered D Yard personally to negotiate. He also authorized an observers committee, 33 civilians invited by the inmates to witness and mediate. The committee was extraordinary. Tom Wicker, associate editor of the New York Times; Herman Badillo, the first Puerto Rican member of Congress; William Kunstler, the civil rights attorney who had defended the Chicago 7; Clarence Jones, publisher of the Amsterdam News and former advisor to Martin Luther King Jr.; Arthur Eve, a New York State Assemblyman; Bobby Seale, co-founder of the Black Panther Party, arrived on September 11th. These were not fringe radicals. These were journalists, lawyers, and elected officials who walked voluntarily into a yard controlled by 1,281 prisoners because they believed negotiation could work. The inmates presented 28 demands covering legal rights, medical care, religious freedom, labor conditions, and living standards. Oswald agreed to most of them, but he refused 2 things: complete criminal amnesty for the uprising and the removal of Warden Mancusi. When William Quinn died on September 11th, the stakes changed completely. Under New York law, every inmate in D Yard could now face felony murder charges. Without amnesty, surrender meant life sentences. The inmates held firm. The observers pleaded with Governor Rockefeller to come to Attica, to show the prisoners that their demands were being heard at the highest level. Rockefeller refused. He did not send a message. He did not make a phone call. He sent a deputy. By the night of September 12th, Rockefeller and Oswald had made their decision. They would retake the prison by force. At 8:25 in the morning on September 13th, Oswald addressed D. Yard through a megaphone. He told inmates to release the hostages. He did not tell them that negotiations were over. He did not tell them that armed officers were already in position. He gave them no warning of what was about to happen. At 9:46 in the morning, helicopters appeared over the yard and dropped canisters of CN and CS tear gas. The yard disappeared into a cloud of white chemical smoke. And then the shooting started. Hundreds of officers, including state police troopers, correctional officers, park police, and sheriff's deputies, opened fire into the gas cloud. They fired shotguns loaded with double-aught buckshot. They fired 357 Magnums. They fired two .70 caliber hunting rifles, loaded with unjacketed expanding bullets, ammunition so destructive that it is banned under the Geneva Conventions for use in war. They used it on American citizens in a prison yard. The shooters had no targets. They could barely see through the tear gas. They fired into the smoke at anything that moved. Between 2,000 and 4,500 rounds were fired in approximately 6 to 15 minutes. When the smoke cleared, 29 inmates lay dead or dying. 9 hostages were dead. A 10th, Harrison Whalen, died on October 9th from his wounds. At least 128 people had been shot. 89 were seriously wounded. Among the dead hostages were men like Sergeant Edward Cunningham, 52, father of 8 children. John D'Arcangelo Jr., 23, a young guard with 1 child. Elon Werner, 64, a civilian clerk 2 years from retirement. Every single one of the 10 dead hostages, every guard and every civilian employee that the assault was supposed to save, had been killed by law enforcement gunfire. The people they came to rescue were the people they killed. Bon appetit, justice system. What happened in the next few hours might be the most revealing part of the entire story, because the killing wasn't enough. The state needed a narrative. Within hours of the assault, Gerald Houlihan, the public information officer for the New York Department of Corrections, told reporters that inmates had slit the throats of the hostages. Deputy Commissioner Walter Dunbar claimed 1 hostage had been castrated. Governor Rockefeller issued a public statement declaring that prisoners had carried out the cold-blooded killings they had threatened. The story ran on every front page in the country. America was told that the animals inside Attica had murdered their hostages in cold blood. It lasted less than 24 hours. Monroe County Medical Examiner Dr. John Edlin conducted the autopsies and confirmed that all 10 hostages had died from gunshot wounds. No throats had been fatally slashed. No castration had occurred. 2 hostages had superficial knife wounds, but they died from police bullets. Rockefeller called the exposure a very unfortunate and embarrassing situation. That was his response to getting caught lying about how 39 people died. Unfortunate, embarrassing, not criminal, not resignation worthy, embarrassing. Meanwhile, President Richard Nixon, captured on White House tapes, praised the assault as a beautiful operation and, when discussing how to handle prisoners in general, offered this insight. You know what stops them? Kill a few. He also noted approvingly that the Attica prisoners were primarily black. This was the President of the United States, on tape, in the Oval Office. And then came the reprisals. After the shooting stopped, surviving inmates were stripped naked and forced to crawl through mud, broken glass, and latrines. Officers formed 2 lines, a gauntlet, and beat naked men with nightsticks as they passed, shouting racial slurs. There were documented cases of sexual assault. Frank Smith, known as Big Black, the man who had spent 4 days protecting hostages, was singled out. Officers forced him to lie naked on a metal table for 6 hours. They beat his genitals. They burned him with cigarettes. They dropped hot shell casings on his skin. They placed a football under his chin and told him that if it fell, they would shoot him. They played Russian roulette with a shotgun pressed to his head. Smith urinated blood for 2 years afterward. He spent the next 26 years fighting for justice in court. In 1997, a jury awarded him $4 million, the largest verdict ever given to a prisoner. He died in 2004, having never received an apology from the state. The legal aftermath was a masterclass in institutional self-protection. 62 inmates were indicted on 1,289 criminal counts, the largest series of indictments in New York State history. How many state troopers were indicted? 1, for reckless endangerment. The charges were dismissed. How many law enforcement officers were convicted of anything? 0, not for killing 39 people, not for using banned ammunition, not for torturing survivors, not for lying to the press. Special Prosecutor Malcolm Bell resigned in 1974, alleging a cover-up. He claimed he had built cases to indict 6 troopers for murder and 60 to 70 more for reckless endangerment, but his superiors blocked every single one. State troopers had removed their name badges before the assault. They failed to record weapon serial numbers. They wrote false incident reports. The evidence was destroyed by the people who created it. On December 31st, 1976, Governor Hugh Carey closed the book on Attica. He pardoned all inmates who had pleaded guilty and dismissed pending actions against law enforcement. He called the prosecution the darkest day in the history of New York State's jurisprudence. The inmates had been indicted, tried, and convicted. The men who killed them walked free without so much as a disciplinary hearing. In 2000, 502 former inmates and families received $8 million in a settlement. In 2005, surviving hostages and families of killed employees, known as the Forgotten Victims of Attica, received $12 million. In neither case did the state admit wrongdoing. Historian Heather Ann Thompson spent a decade piecing together the full story in her book, Blood in the Water, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 2017. The book was banned in New York State prisons until 2022. A book about Attica, banned in Attica. You can't write irony that thick. So, how do you actually survive a place like Attica, or any maximum security prison where the walls are designed to break you? First, read the landscape the moment you arrive. Every prison has a racial and political geography, and learning it fast is the difference between navigating safely and walking into a situation you can't walk out of. Figure out who controls what, which groups run, which parts of the yard, which cell blocks belong to whom, and find your place in that map without making enemies on day one. Second, find allies early, but trust slowly. In a place like Attica, isolation is a death sentence. You need people who will watch your back in the yard and warn you when something is about to go down. But alliances built too quickly with the wrong people can get you killed faster than having no allies at all. Watch, listen, take your time. Third, build a routine and protect it with your life, not your physical life, your mental life. Read everything you can get your hands on. Exercise daily, write letters. The men who survive long stretches in maximum security are the ones who create structure inside the chaos. Without it, the walls close in, and your mind starts eating itself. Fourth, learn the guards. Know which ones follow the rules and which ones do not. Know which ones will look the other way, which ones are looking for a reason to send you to isolation, and which ones might actually help you if things go sideways. This is survival intelligence, and it is as important as anything happening in the yard. Fifth, if a riot breaks out, and Attica proved they can erupt from almost nothing, get low, get to cover, stay away from windows, catwalks, and open spaces. Do not stand near hostages. Do not stand near leaders. Do not stand anywhere that makes you a target. Because as Attica proved, when the state decides to retake a prison, they do not always aim carefully. But here is the truth nobody wants to say out loud. In a place like Attica, on September 13th, 1971, survival was not about strength. It was not about smarts. It was not about alliances or routines, or about knowing which guard to avoid. It was about where you happened to be standing when 2,000 rounds came through the tear gas. Some men lived because they were behind a wall. Some men died because they were 3 feet to the left. That is not a survival strategy. That is luck. And luck is the one thing no prison manual can teach you. The McKay Commission concluded its report with a line that has echoed through every decade since. Attica is every prison, and every prison is Attica. They were not being poetic. They were issuing a warning. The conditions that produced the uprising, overcrowding, dehumanization, racial injustice, institutional indifference, were not unique to one facility in Western New York. They were systemic. And more than 50 years later, with over 2 million Americans behind bars, 7 times the incarceration rate of 1971, that warning has not expired. Attica Correctional Facility is still open. It still operates as a maximum security prison, holding roughly 2,000 inmates. Advocates continue to push for its closure. Volumes of the official investigation remain sealed by court order, and the state of New York has never issued a formal apology for killing 39 people and lying about it. If this story hit you the way it should, there is a lot more where it came from. We have covered some of the most brutal prisons, camps, and survival situations on the planet, and every one of them has something to teach you about how systems work, how people endure, and what happens when power goes unchecked. Check out the rest of our videos. You might learn something that saves your life. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep surviving.